and I'm a drummer trying to learn. I'm like, are you a drummer by any chance? He said, yes, I'm Leslie Ming. I was like, what? What? You're who?
That is wild.
He's like, I'm Leslie Ming. And I didn't, all I said was energy level. Get on, good. And he was like on the phone, he's like, yo, let me call you back. Oh.
Hello and welcome to Eclectic Selections, the human music recommendation service. My name is Liam Flanagan and I will be your musical guide, recommending you the best in music wherever and whenever it came from. You're currently watching our interview series where each month I interview our guest curator and they give us a set of recommendations, 5 recommendations. So now let's go over to either my past or my future self and see what recommendations our guest has. Okay, and what brings us nicely on to your third recommendation is that rock influence that Slave had. Because your third selection is Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix.
So I remember I must have been 5 or 6, and my dad took me to Caldor's, which no longer exists. Caldor was a department store, like a Kmart. It's like Walmart or Kmart, but it was called Caldor. And they had a music section with vinyl and cassettes and stuff. And he's like, I'm gonna show you something I listened to in college. And he bought Are You Experienced on a cassette. And we get into the car and put the tape on. And I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I'm like 5 or 6, like, yeah, I like that, Dad. Third Stone from the Sun comes on. And it was like, I was so freaked out. I wanted to get out of the car. I was scared to death, like when that song came on.
Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to hear that one when I was 5. That's definitely the wildest one.
The chords he's playing at the top, and he has like, and I'm like, what in the hell is that? Like now we know it's like delays and effect pedals and things like that. But yeah, when you're that young, you don't, these sounds are foreign. And then it goes into like a kind of regular rock thing. And then it goes into a regular rock thing. And then in the middle, the floodgates open. Mitch Mitchell goes into that Elvin Jones jazz swing. And it's just, Noel Redding starts doing that walk. That to me is probably one of the greatest moments in recorded music history. Like when I hear that.
They are a phenomenal like rhythm section.
Yo, the lock is crazy. It's like, it's just, then it's like, that you will never hear surf music again. It's like, and he starts doing, and obviously I wasn't a drummer then, but I was just like, Dad, yo, this is crazy. So fast forward to becoming a drummer. One of my greatest influences is the great Mitch Mitchell. What a performance. I mean, it's Elvin Jones, it's Max Roach, it's Philly Joe Jones in a rock context. And like that to me is just unbelievable. And when you go back and look at the rock drummers from the 60s, most of them wanted to be Buddy Rich or Gene Krupa. And then the music of the time was rock and roll. So they play rock and roll, but you hear their influences. And then the funk drummers, Funky George, Kool and the Gang, Zig from the Meters, the Motown drummers, Mike Clark, Joe Dukes, like all the Idris Muhammad, they were all jazz musicians. And then it was kind of
like, that's what they did at night, isn't it? Like they paid the bills with the
Motown guys would go down there and play all the hits, in the pit. And at night they would go play in the clubs around Detroit. They would be like their idols: Philly Joe Jones, Papa Joe Jones, Max Roach, Art Blakey, etc. So like all my favorite drummers in funk, like Mitch Mitchell, like wound up working in rock, but you could tell that he was serious into jazz and his use of rudiments, using 6-stroke rolls and paradiddles and things like that. He used rudiments really well, and he squeezed it into a rock and roll context.
So your next recommendation is What's Up Front That Counts by The Count.
This one right here. So with The Counts, it's interesting because these records kind of go chronologically in a way, like with Hendrix being like the first discovery of music, and then Slave kind of being like, okay, being a musician and Cool in the Gang becoming my favorite band, and then meeting them later in life. Slave as
Yeah.
well with Steve Harrington. But with the Counts, it's one of those things where when I was heavy into buying funk and playing bass, I didn't know they existed back then because they were very obscure. And
Yeah, I'd never heard of that.
I never
Until you sent it
encountered
over.
I never encountered it. Now, the musicians in the Counts, unbeknownst to me, were part of my childhood because those guys were part of Bohannon's backing band,
Oh, right.
right? So the guitarist, Leroy Emanuel, and the organist, Mose Davis, were Detroit guys, and
Yeah.
Bohannon was working for Motown Review. And when he cut his first album, Stop and Go, his main guitarist and keyboard player were Mose Davis and Leroy Emanuel of the Counts. So their sound was familiar to me because Bohannon was one of those guys I collected along with Slave, Cool in the Gang, Brass Construction, BT Express, etc. So I knew their sound. They have a distinctive sound.
Yeah.
And when I put that thing on the turntable in the little listening station, I was like, oh yeah, oh yeah.
That was pretty much my reaction to it. Like 2 tracks in, I was just like, flipping out.
I was like, this is
This
the
is
Counts.
great.
And I'm not sure I'm sure I would have loved them as a kid, but the Counts didn't have a bass player. That's Mose Davis playing the bass with his left hand on the organ and with the foot
All
pedal.
right, yeah. Like
So
the
they
door.
didn't have a proper bass guitarist. So, he's doing that with the organ. And I took that record home and like my head was blown clean open. Now at this point, I'm basically a hip hop artist and producer. I'm not playing any instruments. So, I'm just enjoying it as a funk fanatic and as a fan. I never even sampled it. I just listened to it as a fan. But then obviously when I got into drumming, I pulled that thing back up, and then my appreciation for it went even more. The song "Why Not Start All Over Again," it's unbelievable. Like when they start doing that chromatic walk up on the organ, like "Dur, dur, 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 dur," and then they do it backwards, "Dur, dur, 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 dur," and then like the drummer is like going insane, and then you have like tenor sax underneath just holding long notes, and then like the Leroy is chucking along, and you have the percussion going on. Like the jam section on the second half of "Why Not Start All Over Again" to me is just as intense as "Third Stone from the Sun." It's just in a funk setting, but
Yeah,
it's just
that's a very intense.
it's very intense. Like they're just it's almost spiritual in nature the way that they're playing it. And I just every time I hear that, I just want to play and listen, and it makes whenever I feel like I'm getting disenchanted with music or the music business, I put that on and remind myself, no, this is why you do this. To one day be as good as these
As good
guys.
as those songs.
Want to one day make music that makes people feel the way you feel listening to this song. I mean, the whole album's a smoker. There's not one weak cut. It's 6 hardcore smoking cuts. I mean,
100%.
Rhythm Changes, Pack of Lies, Bills. The whole record is just a thinking single. It's just a smoking album. But that particular song, the way it starts, it's like from a whisper to a scream. It's like dum, 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 dum. It's like, okay, we're strolling in a park, and by the end, it's like a volcanic eruption. I got to give it up, man. It's a hell of a excursion as a musician to listen to that record, and it just makes you really realize what funk is about. Groove, just the way they groove.
Stone Cold grooves, yeah.
Yeah, and with the jazz sensibility on top and the rock and roll attitude, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, man. I don't think there's an album that's just as consistently funky, word consistently being the key. I don't think there's too many records that are consistently funky like that. Like all albums have a ballad or they have something lighter to mix it up. They might be more balanced than that, but if you just want to put it on and you want all funk all the time, don't bother me, don't change nothing, funk or die, you put that record on, man.
I agree. That's that. Yeah. It doesn't have any other gear. It's just like I'm 100% funk. So that brings us to BT Express Energy to Burn.
Woo! Now this one might be the longest story because there's a story in here that's insane. This was BT Express and Brass Construction to me are like two, family groups because both of them were New York, Brooklyn-based bands. Both of them were in my mother's collection, and both of them, their financial backer for both bands was a guy named Dr. Coolidge Applebay. That's the doctor who delivered me. So my mother,
yeah. So there's a real family connection.
so my mother's OBGYN was the financial backer for Brass Construction and BT Express. So the first person to ever see me alive was responsible for the two groups. So
you were destined to become a funk drummer.
It's in the blood. And one day, I remember the date because I saved the receipt. January 14th, 1989. I went to a record store. I still have the receipt. I find Energy to Burn. I guess all funk records were $3.99 at that point, but they were $3.99.
Yeah.
Thing.
Because no one valued it at that point, right?
At that point, it was old. They were into New Jack Swing. Like it was about sweat and hip hop. It wasn't about. I go into a record store in the Village with my dad. I was like, I've never seen this one, and I take it home. Bass playing, Jamal Lewis Risbrook, the bass player. So it's classic BT, but the later beats, the first two albums, the drummer's name was Terrell Woods. The drummer was Leslie Ming. Albums 3 through 5. So I found those albums later and I'm like, this guy, Leslie Ming's a good drummer. And when I flipped it over to the back, I was looking at his outfit, kind of like Mark Adams. And I said, I want this outfit. See how he's got like a striped, it's almost like he's got like a striped jumpsuit on.
Oh,
like
yeah.
It looks like the Lifesavers. He's got a big afro. So I just said, I'm in 6th grade, mind you. And I'm like, I want that outfit. I'm gonna look just like that. I used to draw album covers and I used to draw myself in his outfit, but with a bass. And I'm like, I'm gonna get that outfit. If it kills me, I'm gonna find that goddamn outfit and I'm gonna wear that thing on stage and I'm gonna be the baddest bass player on earth. So this is like 89 or so. So basically 25 years pass. I pick up the drums. Obviously, when I pick up the drums, I'm studying Leslie Ming. Energy Level has that monster drum break at the top. So, now that I'm a drummer, not only am I studying his fashion, but I'm studying his playing. And I'm like, damn, this guy is really one of my biggest influences, right? 2014, I'm leaving my gym like a few miles from here. I'm driving home. I'm going to the post office. My P.O. box is like in Cambria Heights, which is 2 neighborhoods over. So I'm going to my post office and it's like a residential area. So you're driving through the streets.
Yeah.
And there's a guy standing outside talking on the phone when I'm going down the residential block, and he had a Guitar Center drum off shirt on. So I stopped the car. I walked back a block. I said, listen, I'm not crazy. I don't want to bother you. I see you got the Guitar Center drummer shirt on. And I'm a drummer trying to learn. I'm like, are you a drummer by any chance? He said, yes, I'm Leslie Ming. I was like, what? What? You're who?
That is wild.
He's like, I'm Leslie Ming. And I didn't, all I said was energy level. Get on, good. And he was like on the phone, he's like, yo, let me call you back. We wind up talking for 3 hours on the street in front of his house. And he's like, I got a set down in the basement. You want to come play? And we go down in the basement and start playing. Like, you can't make this up. You can't make this up. I'm coming home from the gym, like, you can't make this up. This is 25 years after I was trying to draw myself in his outfit.
Yeah.
And this is like while I'm studying his music. I meet him on a street in my neighborhood randomly because of a t-shirt. And long story short, we become friends and he becomes like my mentor. Like,
I had down in my notes, like, meeting these guys who are your heroes, like, did they live up to expectations? But I think they did. Like,
well, they did. And it was meeting George Brown from Kool and the Gang, and interviewing him. And he's like, how do you know all this? And I'm like, you got to understand, man, like, when I'm into something, I do all the research. So I became friendly or cool with these because I don't just ask the same questions when I interview them and then they find out I play too, and then I'll play them my music. They'll give me constructive criticism or feedback, or they'll be very encouraging to me. and like Ronald Bell, George Brown, Leslie Ming, I mean, these are guys that were like my Mount Rushmore of musical influences. Steve Arrington,
Yeah,
and then to meet these guys
it's great.
decades later, it's like I'm grateful.
Thank you to you all for watching this video. If you want to support Eclectic Selections and join our community, there are various ways you can do so. Number one, you can comment, like, and subscribe right here on YouTube. This helps this video get noticed and helps other music lovers like yourself discover great music. Number two, you can follow us over on Twitter or even sign up to our newsletter. Here you'll get all the latest news, extra recommendations, plus some humorous and informative conversation. And the final way is to join our Discord community where you can chat with other music lovers and myself. We can talk about music and other topics too. All the links to support Eclectic Selections are below in the description of this video. Thanks again for watching, and until next Thursday, keep it eclectic.